Okay, let's not kid ourselves here. David Bowie was awesome. To say that he was an important figure in the music industry would definitely be an understatement. And despite reaching commercial success with his ever-pop-centric Let's Dance, he would continue to reinvent himself along with the 26 albums that he released throughout his life from 1967 all the way up to 2 days before his passing in 2016. Pretty much every single album that he's put out always had a different kind of goal in mind. This kind of differentiation would practically kill any other artist's career, but Bowie managed to make it work. He was just so captivating of an artist that anybody would be able to enjoy his work no matter what genre he was going to go into. I'm recording all of this in January of 2026, and so it'll mark 10 years since the release of Black Star, and also 10 years since we lost David Bowie. And for this video, I'm going to be celebrating his legacy not from his music or his live shows, or really, anything regarding his music. Instead, we are going to be focusing on one strange, intriguing venture that David had in the late 90s at a point in time where the world was just about to receive a digital explosion with the internet. Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between, let me introduce you to the wonderful world of BowieNet. If you were alive between 1998 and 2006, you had the opportunity to have your internet provider be powered by the thin white duke himself. Yeah, imagine that conversation when you get into a Halo lobby. Dude, I'm running AT&T for my internet. How is your speed so much better than me? But not only was BowieNet a way for fans to be able to run LimeWire with, but it was also a way for fans to be able to receive exclusive content from the man himself. It was by far one of the most elaborate ways for David Bowie to get on board with the whole internet thing, while Prince was getting ready to sue eBay over people selling used copies of his albums, and also the entire internet. So now I have to ask, why? What made David decide to go through with the idea of not just having a website, but an entire provider for anyone to access anything on the internet ever? And why did it die off so fast after nearly 8 years of existence? Well, for this video, I'm going to be digging through the archives to figure out exactly what happened to BowieNet, how it worked, and if it could have been successful today with the rather unfortunate development of the internet lately. The 90s was a weird time to be David Bowie. Now, don't get me wrong, he was always finding ways to reinvent himself, even at his prime. I mean, we're talking about the person who recorded The Laughing Gnome, for crying out loud. But as we got into the 90s, when technology was the biggest evolution and the sound of music had become more avant-garde and democratized than ever before, David got weird. Our first ever bit of 90s noodling from David was 1993's Black Tie, White Noise, a record that more or less delved into the world of contemporary dance and soul music. In 1995, he released One Outside, an experimental album that depicts a world where people use death as an art statement. The album's coinciding tour even had 9 Inch Nails as one of its opening acts. But if we're going to be talking about industrial rock, then let's head over to 1997, where he released a full-on industrial record titled Earthling. Despite the much freakier sound, the writing was focused to be a bit more approachable, and a lot of these songs pull that off really well, my personal favorite of which being I'm Afraid of Americans, and more specifically, its remix done by Trent Reznor of 9 Inch Nails. You can actually see Trent in the video. He's one of the main focuses of the video as he's looking over David like, I'm gonna get you. But as we got into Earthling, David had one hyperfixation up his sleeve, a brand new invention that was about to become the biggest breakthrough in how we view the world, a little creation called the internet. And this is something that David had actually been waiting for a while, as he had seen a lot of potential in the digital world before legs were invented. It had even been reported that he even had an email since the 1980s. In fact, to jump ahead in time a little bit, his method for coming up with lyrics where he cuts up words and puts them together to make lyrics, one of his buddies, Ty Roberts, created a piece of computer software made to simulate that technique in the digital world. He even got an interactive CD-ROM. Alright, David's the best artist artist. No one else can prove you otherwise. He has a CD-ROM. He's the greatest of all time. Take that, Jelly Roll. Alright, but jokes aside, David was always obsessed with the ever-evolving digital world. But I promise you he wouldn't be into Web3. Trust me, he would have known better. So, sometime in late 1996, David had a vision. A portal to be able to directly communicate with fans, send out music, promote events, let fans shop merchandise and CDs, whatever he could think of. He wanted a David Bowie internet. A Bowie internet. A BowieNet. And so, with the help of Bowie's business management colleague, Robert Goodale, as well as multimedia producer Ron Roy, they would spend the following year tinkering and developing this all-new enticing ISP. Yeah, no, this wasn't just going to be any website for people to go onto. This was going to be a full-on internet service provider, much like AOL and Netscape at the time. The idea was that it would be more focused directly on, well, music and media-centered communities, instead of trying to be an all-centered provider for everyone to use. Yeah, you'd be surprised how democratized the internet was back in the day. You could pretty much just pick up any provider you ever wanted and just be able to use that to run the internet instead of just AT&T and Spectrum and hidden fees and shit. So yeah, that could theoretically make this more sustainable if they only isolated to just one specific niche audience. But they needed to test the waters first. So in September of 1996, they released the Earthling single Telling Lies onto David Bowie's website, with 3 versions being released weekly. No joke, this was actually the first ever downloadable single. Like ever. That's really f***ing cool. And this experiment seemed to be successful, as over 300,000 people downloaded that original release. So now it was time for them to put things into gear. With the help of the Concentric Network Corporation for letting them use their infrastructure as the backbone, BowieNet was ready for takeoff. And on July 17th, 1998, it was announced all over the world that a brand new ISP was available for the online music scene, and was made accessible later that year on September 1st.
Since its birth online last September, BowieNet has emerged as the most progressive, not to mention the coolest internet service provider on the planet that is a reflection of David Bowie, the web innovator, his vision and personality.
The best thing that's happened with our site, I think, because it's produced a kind of a community feel, that one doesn't become the focus of everything all the time. And it's amazing how much you get into their lives and find out about what they're doing and what's interesting them other than just being part of the BowieNet.
By 1999, it looked like BowieNet was doing seemingly well. If you wanted to use BowieNet as your ISP, the unlimited service was priced at $19.95 a month, which was pretty reasonable compared to AOL's $21.95 a month at the time. AOL was actually starting to slow down with customer demand, so this was a pretty good gateway for other ISPs to blossom. Now, of course, with what we know now with closed-in communities, there were concerns that this would overtake other independent online fan communities at the time. Thankfully, this was all taken into consideration before launch, so if you were not interested in the ISP but still wanted the exclusive content and bonuses, there was a content-only service that was also available, which was $5.95 a month. Now, we sadly do not know the full details on how well it did at launch, but what we do know is that after a year or two of being out on the market, BowieNet would hit a peak user base of over 100,000 people. From reviews at the time, people were mostly pleased about the performance of BowieNet. The websites they wanted to use ran fine, the websites that BowieNet was featuring was fine, and as far as I'm aware, there was no concerns about dropouts or anything. Keep in mind, this was the late 90s and early 2000s, so this is when you can only get either a 28K modem or a 56K modem. So while it wasn't exactly groundbreaking compared to nowadays, it was still a major breakthrough at the time, especially when one of those selling points was to run 3D graphics on different websites if they used them. One of those 3D places was Bowie World, an entire virtual environment where people could explore buildings and artwork based entirely on his artistry, and you could even find and chat with other players with their own models and avatars. That was a pretty elaborate concept, honestly, especially for it all just being on a musician of all people. Oh, and if you wanted to use email, then BowieNet would have you covered too, even including their own special domain and everything. But not only were you able to receive and send emails thanks to David Bowie, but you can also talk to David Bowie himself, as he would often go into community chats and talk to people under the pseudonym Sailor, where he'd do Q&As, ask people what they were up to, all sorts of things. He'd honestly be the kind of person that would have a Discord server, let's be honest here. And as for the fan-exclusive content, Bowie locked in hard. Let me get the general exclusives out of the way, as there's no proper timeline to them. If you were to sign up to BowieNet, you were able to listen to all of his music released up to that point, thanks to a digital encoded music interface that was available on the website. There was even a little radio station that played songs curated by David himself, which was pretty cool. But if you wanted to feel like you were in the musical driver's seats, you were also given the Fame Jam, in which, with the help of some music software, you could make up your own alternate mix of David's first #1 US hit, Fame, a song co-written with John Lennon. You could add or remove your own guitars, bass, drums, vocals, verses, whatever. For a modern comparison, this was David Bowie's stem player, if you will. As for the mixes from David himself, fans would get exclusive mixes and unreleased archived recordings, including, but not limited to, an unreleased 1971 recording of Hang On To Yourself, a track from Ziggy Stardust, other various soundtracks, mixes, and CD content, as well as the underrated banger made as the anthem for the service, Fun. You were also set to receive CDs in the mail containing all sorts of goodies, including more songs, videos, and other digital content. You would need to log into BowieNet in order to access the content though, so you couldn't just give it to a friend or resell them. Given that the discs were free as a sign-up bonus for BowieNet, I totally understand that. I'm actually okay with that. Alright, now let's get into the timeline stuff. We're starting things off with what was titled the Cyber Song Contest, in which David Bowie showed off a new music track that he was making that was mostly instrumental, and had fans send in suggestions for what lyrics could fill in the spot. A total of 80,000 suggestions were sent between November 2nd to December 15th of 1998. 20-year-old Alex Grant won the contest, and he received a ton of goodies from it, including a $15,000 publishing contract, a VIP weekend in New York City, where he was flown in and got to be in the studio where David got to record with his lyrics, a 1-year subscription to BowieNet, a $500 certificate to CD Now, a 3-year subscription to Rolling Stone magazine, and a signed copy of David's entire music catalog? Holy f***, that's incredible! This would all cultivate into the track What's Really Happening, and was made exclusive to subscribers for the following months until in September of 1999, when it was added into the tracklist for David's 22nd album, Hours. God, the geekiness doesn't even stop there, as this album is technically a soundtrack for the game that he started in at the time, which was Omikron the Nomad Soul. I might make a whole video on that, but who knows? It's so geeky, I love it. The next bit of exclusive content happened on May 24th, 1999, where fans actually got to watch the recording process of the winning song through the Bowie Cam webcast. This was a live stream done of the studio, and fans got to see the creation of the track in real time through a 360 camera? How the f*** did he do that at the time? Like, this was when Van Halen couldn't even send out a visible music video, let alone an entire 360 webcast. I'm sorry, I'm just losing my shit at all this. David really knew how to use the internet. Holy shit. Well, anyway, that was another thing that Bowie got to do with his newfangled internet service, and while I believe the footage of the stream itself is lost, we do have some handheld footage done inside of the studio, so that's neat. The next exclusive release was on September 13th, 2000, where fans received a free double CD live album, which was titled LiveAndWell.com. It's made up of various recordings of performances made when David was on his Earthling tour, and the way that fans got to engage with this one was by submitting photographs that could show up on the album's packaging. That's really cool. Later on, in 2002, users would receive behind-the-scenes content for Bowie's next album, Heathen, as well as journal entries to keep fans up to date on what he was up to, and the website would slowly get updates with point systems and the addition to website pages made with Adobe Flash. Yeah, Adobe Flash. So yeah, the exclusives sent out were cool, the service was going well, and it seemed like things were doing well for BowieNet. Right? Alright, I know you were kind of expecting this to be some big long chapter where I get to poke at all of the failures and say that it was the biggest fall of insert person here's career, but honestly, there's not too much to say here. I think I could safely say for the first time ever with anything regarding software, but I believe that the problems weren't related to the service itself, as BowieNet was rather successful in terms of its goals, but it was rather related to the technology at the time. Keep in mind, this had ran from 1998 to 2006, so most users at the time didn't exactly have the highest end hardware to be able to run a lot of the websites that BowieNet was told it supported. It's kind of funny too, given that we're still dealing with hardware limitations on software today, with Windows 11 being too demanding for people, older iPhones getting slower with iOS, and websites being able to churn down computers pretty hard. And that includes the website that you are watching this very video right now. YouTube takes up so many resources to run, it's absurd. Side note, Andrew Huang, I love your stuff, I'm a big fan of yours, I'm in the middle of reading your book. Why does your website take up so much processing to render? It's insane. I've only got a 2080, dude, please. As for the service itself, while BowieNet wasn't exactly a bad service, this isn't like when Soulja Boy tried to start a gaming business with those emulation handhelds. This was a top-of-the-line infrastructure that was the backbone behind it all. In fact, it was considered one of the fastest and most reliable startup services at the time, but because of the plain white at-home computers that perhaps a lot of its users were using at the time, they didn't exactly have the hardware to be able to experience BowieNet at its fullest, especially if his own exclusives were actual 3D environments and live streams. Like, there was a reason that Slamfest 99 is now lost media. Live streaming was just not there yet in the Y2K days. Hell, we wouldn't even fully realize the concept of anyone able to share videos online until YouTube launched in 2005. Sure, there were other platforms you could use beforehand, but come on, what are you using right now? Like you see what I mean? So because of that, I'd presume most people would be more interested in just whatever exclusive content they could get, which they could mostly be happy with the $5 plan, and then use whatever alternative dial-up services they were using beforehand. But even with that, it seemed like the exclusives were starting to slow down too. We wouldn't see any new live events or bonus CDs from David throughout the 2000s, only just online bonuses and archival tracks. That contest that we saw at the beginning, that was the only one of its kind for BowieNet. And eventually, even the online bonuses and David's communication with chat members began to slow down. And that leads us to June 23rd, 2004, where David had suffered a heart attack while on his reality tour. He was in the middle of performing The Man Who Sold the World, so instead of finishing the show at that moment when his heart attack started, he just kind of pushed through it. Of course, he did wrap it up afterwards, but the fact that it happened to him while performing sounded grueling. This would result in what was effectively a retirement for him. Reality would be his last album as of now, the album's tour would become his final tour, and he had to lay low in terms of output. By the time 2006 rolled around, the internet had become far more technologically advanced than BowieNet had planned for, as dial-up technology would be swiftly replaced with broadband, a connection type that is still being used to this very day. And in March of 2006, the BowieNet ISP had closed its doors. Although the ISP and the email address were no longer active, it would continue to run its fan community forums until exactly 6 years later on March 12, 2012. And following that, the davidbowie.com domain would be reworked into a general news and archival site. Bowie would continue to stay quiet in terms of anything regarding music or the internet. He did do a bit of acting, and he got to voice Lord Royal Highness in SpongeBob's Atlantis SquarePantis, but in terms of musical output, he didn't really get to do much. It didn't help that in 2011, that lost album that he recorded in 2001 would be leaked online, which was that Toy album. So maybe he didn't want to go back to it all. And it would be totally fine for him to just kick back after, 45 or so years of work. But that would be until January 8th, 2013. That beautiful, seemingly mundane Tuesday morning was when fans were notified about his new album through his website, which is really funny, honestly. And then on March 8th of that year, he would release that said album, his 25th album, the next day. And in the spirit of what he did before, he released the single Where Are We Now, along with its accompanying music video, through his website and on iTunes on February 28th. And when the album released, there was even an exclusive iTunes Deluxe Edition as well. The album itself itself is a rather somber look into David's career, even delving into the concept of mortality. It's a rather melancholic listen compared to albums of the past, but it is the kind of artwork that David was known for in the past, as its sound was based heavily on his Berlin trilogy, and the album itself was received pretty well by fans and critics alike. And just as we thought things would stop there, on November 19th, 2015, David would premiere on YouTube the music video to the 10-minute single and title track for his upcoming 26th album, Black Star. And throughout 2015 to 2016, a series of 15-second videos would premiere on Instagram, with these videos being mini stories that used the music from the album as its backing piece. This was then given the title Unbound, a Black Star Insta miniseries. On January 8th, 2016, tying in with David Bowie's 69th birthday, we would see the release of Black Star. Even more bleak than the album before, this album's focus is more on David's life as a whole and the ever closer steps to death. And not to say that the album's entirely gloomy, there's some upbeat jams and some rather hilarious lines that he sings.
When I in the long day go, and she punched me like a dude. I was looking for your ass.
Yeah, no, it's a pretty interesting listen, and it was received pretty well in the music world. And then, on January 10th, 2016, 2 days after the release of Black Star, 2 days after his 69th birthday, and 10 years after BowieNet signed off, David Bowie himself would sign off after a long and private battle with liver cancer at the age of 69.
Always remember that the reason that you initially started working was that there was something inside yourself that you felt that if you could manifest it in some way, you would understand more about yourself and how you coexist with the rest of society. I think it's terribly dangerous for an artist to fulfill other people's expectations. I think they generally produce their worst work when they do that. And the other thing I would say is that if you feel safe in the area that you're working in, you're not working in the right area. Always go a little further into the water than you feel you're capable of being in. Go a little bit out of your depth. And when you don't feel that your feet are quite touching the bottom, you're just about in the right place to do something exciting.
Since Bowie's passing, the estate, as well as his fans, have been keeping the spirits online and continuing to release new content in the online world. On January 28th, 2016, Jonathan Barnbrook, the designer for the Black Star album cover, released the graphic elements of the artwork as a free download for fans to be able to use it in whatever non-commercial projects they wanted to make in order to commemorate his artistry. In 2017 and 2020, we would get extended plays No Plan and Is It Any Wonder, the latter being mostly re-recorded songs he made during the Earthling era, and the former being songs recorded during the Black Star sessions and were intended to be in the coinciding musical act. In 2018, we would see a re-recording project for Never Let Me Down, which was self-considered to be his most disappointing album in terms of production. But the wildest announcement from the estate would be on May 15th, 2020, as the originally exclusive BowieNet live album, liveandwell.com, would be re-released to the public for the first time ever, first starting out as a streaming exclusive and would eventually see physical releases on January 15th, 2021. Later in that year, on November 26th, as part of the ongoing box set that comprises all of David's music, we would see the official release of Toy, that lost album that David recorded all those years back. It's so beautiful to finally see this project make it to retailers after years of scrutiny. I'm so happy. But yeah, even after 10 years since David's passing, we are still finding so many ways to express our love and admiration for him. He's often considered to be one of the most influential and impactful artists of the last century, with him being an important figure in not just the digital landscape, not just the musical landscape, but him even being a major figure in the development of a genre. He's the guy that people credit for post-rock, with his albums from the Berlin trilogy playing a role in it. We would not have Godspeed You Black Emperor without David Bowie. Alright, to be serious, the kind of ambitions that David had wanted to achieve in his life, as well as the kinds that BowieNet had going for it, would become pretty innovative in the development of technology. Because, let's be honest, isn't that kind of what we're doing right now? with things like Patreon, Discord, and Bandcamp, giving exclusive content to fans, letting them partake in the work process, being able to communicate with our fans, that kind of stuff. We are literally making our own BowieNets as we speak. That is incredible. If David Bowie himself were still alive today, I would totally see him running his own Discord server, YouTube live streams, sending out exclusive content through Bandcamp, being able to chat with fans. Maybe he could even try to record an entire album through a f***ing laptop to test the boundaries of music production. I don't know. He would just be the kind of kooky guy that would pull stunts like that off. And I think personally that's what made him so magical. And I think secretly, but certainly, we are carrying that same electronic spirit with us every single day. So, thank you, David Bowie, for not only the incredible music you gave us, but also the incredible vision you had for the digital world. We couldn't have it without you, buddy.
I wish you could swim like the dolphins can swim.